Welcome back to PLS 510. Today we want to finish the forage anti-quality factor and disorder section by taking a quick look at bloat or frothy bloat and grass tetany. Bloat is an accumulation of gases, that would be carbon dioxide and methane, within the rumen during digestion. Ruminants typically release these through eructation or burping. In bloated animals, this is inhibited by a stable foam, and that's why we call it frothy bloat. The prevention of gas release leads to increased pressure within the animal in that rumen, causing expansion or swelling on the left side, labored breathing, frequent urination and defecation, and restlessness of the animal because they feel uncomfortable, presumably. And it will result in death if untreated and severe. Here are some diagrams that may help you begin to get a picture of this if this is not something you have seen before. A normal animal on the upper left, typically both sides symmetrical. A bloated animal, you can see, looking at them from the rear, distension on the left side. The rumen of a normal animal has space at the top of the rumen for the gas that's evolved to escape and then be belched out through the esophageal sphincter. Trapped gas, because of the foam, exerts pressure. The foam blocks the exit of gas, and the rumen distends or extends out and pushes the side of the animal out. Here's a couple of photographs, one from the front up in the upper left and the rear, the lower right, of two bloated individuals. The causes of bloat, again, the causes of this stable foam, is because of the consumption of pastures with a very low fiber content. That is, low fiber forages that have high soluble protein concentrations. And it's this soluble protein that forms that, soapy bubbles, if you want to think of it that way, but that froth, that stable foam in the top of the rumen. Most legumes and vegetative small grains can lead or can have such low fiber that they lead to this high soluble protein concentrations and frothy bloat. That low fiber means rapid digestion and large gas and foam production. Those proteins stabilize the foam, as I said. Bloat may also occur on high grain diets. Other problems that may contribute or intensify the problem: the presence of dew. Oftentimes you will see bloat occur in the spring, early spring, after a front comes through, temperatures drop, there's a heavy dew, and animals grazing the wet, lush green growth will then begin to bloat. And there are chronic bloating animals. How do we treat bloat? Why, there are ways that we can do this by removing the foam, by drenching the animal, and that's force feeding carefully via a tube the animal with vegetable or mineral oil, and this reduces the surface tension of the foam. We can dissipate the pressure, again, by using a hose down the esophagus, or in very extreme cases, puncture the side of the rumen, but only as a last resort and presumably or preferably in the presence of a veterinarian. At the top of this slide is the trochanter that is used to make the hole in the side of the animal. This sleeve fits over the puncturing part of the trochanter, and then it is inserted in the diagram that you see here behind the last rib and in this area between the hips and this last rib and the vertebrae right here. When you insert the trochanter, then pull out the middle, and then that will release the pressure within the rumen. But preventing bloat is a whole lot easier, a whole lot better, and more preferable than having to treat like we have just talked about. One way to prevent bloat is to always have a fair amount of grass in pastures. Now, this is not easy and not always attainable. Some years we just have a tremendous flush of white clover, and it's very difficult to manage and prevent bloat entirely. But if we could keep the amount of legumes in that spring pasture to 50% or less, then that helps. We could use bloat-free legumes such as bird's foot trefoil, the lespedezas, arrowleaf clover, and vetches. Actually, especially bird's foot trefoil, arrowleaf, and vetches, those are minor players for us in Kentucky. They are great if you have them in stand, but I'm not even positive arrowleaf may be an annual in the first place. But bird's foot trefoil, while it is certainly we can grow it here, it is not a very well-adapted plant to Kentucky, so it's not a strong player. Lespedezas, probably, both the annual and perennial lespedezas are not an early spring forage, so in both cases, they are not going to be actively growing during the time of the year when we typically have bloat, but they are bloat-free legumes. We can use feed additives such as paloxylene through bloat blocks or mixed within mineral supplements. We can use ionophores like monensin and lasalicid. The trade names for these are rumensin and bovatec. And we can attempt to control the grazing and intake or alter what they're eating by allowing the legumes to mature some, by rotating into pastures at midday as opposed to giving animals fresh pasture that's got a lot of dew on it, and to try to get animals to consume some hay before grazing in order to have a good stable mat in the rumen, and so to prevent that stable foam formation. And last, of course, cull the chronic bloaters. So that's a very quick look at bloat. We'll probably take it up again when we speak of white clover. Let's take a look finally at grass tetany. Grass tetany is also called hypomagnesemia or grass staggers, not stagers, S-T-A-G-G-E-R-S. It results from low levels of magnesium within the blood, and it typically occurs in the early spring on grass pastures. It is more common in older lactating animals because older animals are much less efficient at mobilizing magnesium from bones to meet the body's needs. And so here we're talking about an older cow that's probably just had a calf and she's just starting to lactate. So the cow, the needs for magnesium are going up quite steeply, and it is quite normal for a mature cow to be cycling minerals in and out of her bones to make up for these periods of high demand, and those older animals are not able to move magnesium out of the bones as efficiently as younger ones during this high demand time for magnesium. The initial symptoms include nervousness, twitching, and isolation from the herd. It eventually results in animal collapsing, convulsions, and death. Now, while this is most common in older lactating animals, this actually happened to one of my steers when I was a high schooler in Georgia. And I went out to feed the steers one day, and one of the steers was, I believe, sitting on its haunches, on its backside. And I would go over to it, and it would stand up, but then it would go and sit down again or roll over. And it scared me as a young teenager. And I called some people that we knew, and they got the veterinarians out there, and they administered the antidote very quickly, and the steer recovered. But so it can happen with steers, and it can happen with cows, but it's just more common with older lactating animals. The causes of grass tetany: low magnesium concentrations and below 0.2% in the dry matter in the forage. This is going to happen during the spring flush of growth where the plant growth is faster than the rate of magnesium absorption. It's also going to be related to high rates of nitrogen or potassium fertilization and acidic soils, because pHs or acidic pHs lowers magnesium availability. This is most especially due to low absorption of magnesium within the animal from forages that have high nitrogen and potassium concentrations. And here's that interaction between fertilizing and this animal disorder. High potassium and nitrogen in the forage, once it gets to the rumen, inhibits magnesium transport across the rumen wall into the animal GI tract. To prevent it, we need to provide high magnesium supplementation at least 30 days prior to calving. You can add magnesium fertilizer as magnesium sulfate or dolomitic limestone, and dolomitic limestone is simply limestone that has magnesium as part of the base mineral structure, not common in Kentucky. Or you can, here's another way to lower your risk, to split the nitrogen and potassium fertilizer applications if you need to put on a lot on in any particular year, and incorporate legumes. This will reduce the incidences of grass tetany, but not totally.